Welcome back to That Dad Guy. It is March 13th, 2025, and we are once again exploring my father's stamp collection right back there. In the last number of episodes, we have been going through his album marked The Americas, Everything But Canada and the United States, and we have been doing it alphabetically. So he has maybe one page of stamps or multiple pages of stamps of a country. And so what we're doing is we're going through each one of those countries, giving a little bit of history, to give you a bit of background about the country. And then we're looking at the stamps that he collected, and then maybe some of the stamps that I was fortunate enough to add to the collection as well. So last week we were in Ecuador. So you might think, looking at a book like this, the Scott Catalog, what the next country might be if you got to Ecuador and you looked, you would think, there isn't another country after Ecuador beginning with E from South America. But in my father's stamp album, there is. So it made me think, I wonder where you would find this country then. Maybe in this album, P through S and L, because when I look at the word, okay, maybe they didn't do this, but maybe they did that. So I looked it up, and it's not in the right place there either. What country am I talking about? I'm talking about El Salvador. El Salvador starts with an E. You'd think it would follow Ecuador, but sometimes it's called Salvador. So you would think it would be in the SA. But in the Scott Catalog, you're going to find it after St. Vincent's and the Grenadine Islands. So if you get past the ST period, then you'll find the country of El Salvador. I'm not sure why. There may be a philatelist out there that can tell me exactly why El Salvador isn't in E, but in the S's and after the EL. Or the STs. Well, that's what we're tackling today. We're trying to figure out about El Salvador, and so I've got a bit of history for you before we get into this album, which is the one that my father has, Americas, and we'll show you some stamps. If that's all right with you, if you're finding my channel for the first time and you're wondering what's going on here, well, that's kind of what we've been doing every Thursday of late. So make sure you like, you subscribe, you leave positive comments, you share with other people, you put the notification bell on so you don't miss out on anything, because there is always something, and you want to be a part of it, don't you? Well, El Salvador, its capital is San Salvador. Its language that's spoken is Spanish. The currency is the US dollar, and the motto is God, Union, Liberty. Not God, Union, and Liberty, just God, Union, Liberty. That's the motto. The ancient history of the region is somewhat murky because El Salvador has a very dense population, and so excavating is very difficult. And it also has volcanic activity, so a lot of volcanic ash from eruptions have covered up a lot of the trace of the previous history. But we do know it was an area of the Mayan civilization. We know that in 1522, Spanish explorers arrived, spreading smallpox throughout the region and killing a lot of the indigenous people. In 1524, Pedro de Alvarado, a Spanish conquistador, after being part of the conquest of the Aztec Empire, moved through Mexico and Guatemala, finding lots and lots of gold. So he thought he would continue further south, but discovered very little gold in El Salvador, but rich volcanic soil for agriculture. So the conquest of the Kuzacaland people took 4 years. So when they came into El Salvador, the indigenous tribes first were very smart. The very first town that the Spanish came into, they abandoned, and they fortified themselves in another city close to the coast. And so when the Spanish arrived at the first city, there was no indigenous people there. So they were wondering what is going on. They say that the Catlec soldiers. That's the name of the people that are there. Their shields were decorated in colorful feathers. The vests that they wore for armor were made of 3-inch thick cotton, which arrows couldn't penetrate. And so the Spanish had some very big difficulty with this tribe. This tribe also battled them back several times. They had to retreat, and the tribe stole the weapons and the uniforms of the Spanish soldiers that were there. The Spanish asked for them back, and they were greeted with the words, "If you want your weapons, come and get them." So they didn't play nice. They had a hard time. But in 1526, San Salvador was established. That was where the Pipil tribe was. In 1526, the Spanish created San Miguel, which was a northern garrison next to the Lenques tribe. But the Lenques tribe fought back. They destroyed that garrison. The leader of that tribe would often dress in Spanish outfits from the soldiers that he killed, and was kind of a way of mocking the Spanish at the time. But in 1537, after a long time, San Miguel was rebuilt too, after the people there were conquered. It became part of the Kingdom of Guatemala, which was created in 1609 as a division of New Spain. So when it got conquered, it became part of New Spain, the greater thing, and then in 1609 became part of the Kingdom of Guatemala. In 1811, there was an independence movement spawned by the American and French revolutions. Their revolutions spawned the indigenous people of El Salvador to think, we want independence from Spain as well. They saw a weakness to Spain through all the Napoleonic wars that they were having. But the insurrection was squashed. In 1814, they had another insurrection. Let's try it again. That one was squashed as well. But in 1821, more than just El Salvador, lots of nations decided they wanted independence, and they got it. And between 1821 and 1823, El Salvador became part of the Mexican Empire. But joined by Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, in 1823, they formed the Federal Republic of Central America, which they stayed in until 1841, when they got their official independence, which they kept until 1896. In 1896, Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador became the Greater Republic of Central America, but it only lasted 2 years, and then El Salvador was once again back on their own as a nation. Their major export was coffee. The government of the time was ruled by the rich landowners that took place there, so it was a free country, but once again, the small, wealthy majority were leading the way. Honduras and El Salvador had tensions through immigration. El Salvador was rich with people, but poor in economy, and so a lot of El Salvadorians left to go to Honduras, where they had more land, and it sparked in 1969, we're jumping way ahead, the football war. 130,000 Salvadorians were forcibly removed from Honduras. In 1979, civil war broke out in El Salvador, and it lasted till 1992. Carlos Humberto Romero was the final president of the country's military dictatorship, and in October 1979, President Jimmy Carter of the United States administration helped stage a coup d'etat, trying to nationalize private companies and take over private land, trying to stop a revolution that was already underway, unfortunately. They thought the election was stolen by Napoleon Duarte, who was exiled to Venezuela. And so guerrilla groups started to be formed even as young as in middle school, high school, and college and university students started to form guerrilla groups and fight back against what they thought was an oppressive regime. And from 1979 to 1992, this country was in a civil war. They had government contracted death squads, which were known to have killed 10 people a day. 75,000 people were killed over 12 years. And it got the United Nations involved to broker a peace treaty in 1992 in Mexico. In 2018, former President Saka was sentenced to 10 years for diverting more than $300 million in state funds to his own private businesses. In 2019, a one-party system was created. The mayor of San Salvador, Nayib Bukele, became president. Homicide rates dropped by 60% from a non-aggression deal with local gangs. In 2021, the New Ideas Party, founded by Bukele, won a landslide victory to be re-elected. And one of the laws that they passed was that there be no more term limits for the president. In 2021, they eliminated malaria, which was great. In 2022, there was massive fights against criminal gangs. State emergency was declared. 53,000 suspected gang members were imprisoned. And Amnesty International called it the worst abuse of human rights since their civil war. One of the things they did too, in 2022, they made Bitcoin legalized tender. But it had a huge drop. They said, we got to get off this. By 2025, they decided this year, February of this year, Bitcoin was removed as legal tender. They use the US dollar now as their currency. So there gives you a rapid history lesson about El Salvador. Was it all peaches and cream, red roses? No. There was a lot of turbulence. There has been a lot of turbulence in a lot of the countries that we've talked about. I think any country that we decide to talk about going forward, it's going to have a bit of a murky past. People are going to get involved from other nations trying to upset governments, to depose whether it's a left-wing government or a right-wing government, to take over exports of something that they want. Sometimes people just can't stop meddling in other people's businesses. That's what we are learning from history here, and that's what we're learning from El Salvador as well, is that they took a lot to fight back. Even from when the Spanish first arrived in their country, the local natives did not want any new influence there. It took them a couple times to get independence. They kept getting swallowed up by local countries trying to create larger countries, but in the end, they're on their own again, and they have a leader that is trying to clean things up, it looks like, but is he doing it the right way? I don't know. Only history will tell. But for right now, what we get a chance to do is look at some of the stamps that have come out through that history of El Salvador, or Salvador, because you're going to find that on the stamps too. Sometimes it's El Salvador, and sometimes it's just Salvador. Let's show you what my father and my opportunities have given me to collect stamps for that country. The earliest stamp in my father's collection is this beautiful stamp. It doesn't look like it's ever been used, but it has been hinged because my father has got a hinge on it, putting it in his collection. But wow, what beautiful stamps back here. You can see it says de El Salvador at the top of that, but the very first one just says Salvador. And larger, newer stamps in the collection as well. Map of the region. And so that's all he had, was the one. So I fortunately have gone to a few stamp shows and have been able to pick up quite a few more stamps. Right now they're on these pages. They probably will get transferred over to Vario pages in the future. But this way you get to see a really good cross section of some of their stamps. And now, based on what I told you at the beginning, you know where to find them in your catalog too. If you're looking under E, you're not going to find it. If you're looking under SA, you're not going to find it. You've got to go right to the back after the St. Kitts and St. Vincent countries. Then you will find El Salvador. Got a little bit of a nibble out of it, but it looks like it's the sister one to the one of my father's that he'd collected. There's some nice early ones here. We're starting to see some of the connections that countries have with their neighbor countries, and whether it is political tensions that they've had or whether they're agreements that they've worked together. Lots of things I didn't know. Starting to learn quite a bit by doing this series. And this is where we end. You know what would be amazing is if this could be turned into me traveling to these countries, learning something, talking to the local people, and discovering their history through their stories, and showing stamps that way. So if you're a big-time producer and want to get on that and help promote that dad guy to travel the world looking at stamps, I'd love to be a part of it. But for now, this is what you get, traveling through and exploring stamps of the world through my father's stamp collection. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll tune in next time. Have a magical week. What, Polo? You say like, subscribe, share, and tell all your friends?
Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy?
Bye. As a stamp collector, I find it so important to have a catalog at the ready. This one being a Scott catalog from 2009. Even though it's 2025, there's a lot of great information in here about all those earlier stamps. You can go to your library and get a more up-to-date probably binder. This one here was originally in a library, and then they sold them off as they got newer catalogs. So I got these really relatively cheap. I got a whole set for about $30 at my stamp show that someone else was getting rid of, and a brand new set of all the catalogs might cost you $1,000. So I think I got a good deal, and my father used to always go to the library and get them for free, so you can do it that way too.